It's about this time I realized I never even moved my mic back into place after my kids are playing up here earlier. You don't have to be perfect, guys. You just have to recognize when you can be doing a little bit better.
Hi. Most people know me as Sean, though in the future, just a guy. Hopefully, will catch on. And like everybody out there, there's much more to be said. You know, there's a whole story behind this face. Today, I want to give you a glimpse of who I am, why I do this, and where I see this channel going, and what I see us experiencing moving forward. Um, then, hopefully, I want to be able to jump into our first deep dive and give you a little bit more of an insight as to how this brain works. Because I think there's a lot of value there. I think a lot of people can learn a bit in being super focused in high stress situations because you kind of have a system that your brain automatically goes through. I was recommended to start doing this YouTube thing because people tell me that I was good at talking them through things that they're going through. Battle buddies, co-workers, family members. From a young age till now, I like listening to people, and I guess I'm good at separating emotion from logic. I just like kind of thinking through how to get to where we want to be. If I can make something super complex understandable and see that aha moment for somebody, that really does something for me. Some people like it, some people don't. I like it. I don't come from a place of perfection. You know, books have always come easy to me, but I'm not perfect. There was only one perfect person. His name was Jesus, Yeshua. If you know him, great. If you don't, get to quick. Um, I failed more than some, less than others. I like to think I've learned a lot from failure, and I've learned a lot from other people's failure. I decided at a very young age that learning vicariously is beneficial, so I highly recommend if you can, do so. Um, One difference that we might have as well is that I choose to adapt and overcome when things knock me down. If you haven't learned how to do that and you're in your 30s like I am, or you're going through some interesting circumstances and you haven't figured out that you have to change because the circumstances might not, figure it out. It'll make your life a lot easier. Not the fact that your circumstances will become easier, but the way that you'll deal with them will be better, and then life will become easier because of it. It all adds up. So I try to continue walking forward with what I'm learning, and I'm trying to pay it forward to more people now because I think a lot of people just need help, need some loving that they might not have gotten when they were younger. I'll point it out again. My stress response is such that I get sharpened in high pressure moments as opposed to getting dulled. One of my more memorable stories is the morning that my first daughter was being born. My lovely sister in law was preparing some food while I was showering off my in labor wife, and then just finished getting her situated. And I was doing a quick wash down when the bathroom door was opened, and where how I was situated in the house, I was able to just pull back the curtain on the shower and look straight out the door and see a flame about 3-4 feet high, licking the bottom of the microwave, starting to touch the ceiling. You know, we're in the basement apartment at the time, so there's a lot of people above us that were about to get hot real fast. But very quickly jumped out the shower, ran over, grabbed the towel that was on the kitchen. This is a learning lesson. If you ever have a grease fire, do not throw water on it. You will create a fireball and explode yourself. Instead, take a dish towel. It can be dry, it could be a little bit damp, and just throw it over the fire. It will extinguish it very quickly. And that's what I did because I knew that. Then after the fire was out and we made sure that nothing else was on fire, I'm looking around. I come back to myself. Mind you, this is only like 25 seconds of real life happening. To find myself, of course, naked because I was just in the shower, in my kitchen with my sister-in-law and my wife and my other younger sister-in-law and my older sister-in-law's two youngest kids who were like babies at the time, which caused me to very quickly run back into the shower. But again, life continues on. if you can find a way to stay calm in stressful situations, when the stresses of the everyday situation come up, hopefully it can start to carry over. That's something I was kind of born with. I've always kind of had a good stress response. Something that I came into, that I learned, that I developed later in life was, which is just a core part of my strength now, is my faith, my walk with Christ. As I said earlier, if you don't know Jesus, get to know him. My relationship, my walk grounds me. Doesn't mean that I have all the answers. Nobody does, but it gives me a better lens to be able to see my problems and my circumstances with. And there's a lot of wisdom and guidance. Please just get into Proverbs. Anyway, so that's a bit of the background, a little bit of the inner workings. Outwardly, at least as of right now, I'm no celebrity, except to maybe my kids. Not fabulously wealthy. My family is comfortable, thank God, but we have to still think of the month-to-month expenses, just like many of you. I come from the trades, most recently, electrician by trade, but I've come up in finance adjacent roles, worked in a bank, worked in insurance, seen all sort of systems, I've seen a lot of scams, and I've had to deal with a lot of human nature because when you talk about death, when you talk about people's finances, when you talk about people's food, cook for a little bit, you talk about educating their kids, working in a school, you get to see a lot of different aspects of people, and you realize a lot of things are similar. There's a lot of bleed over. There's a lot of questions that I think many people wrestle with in those times when you're just bored out of your mind and you're stuck somewhere that you don't want to be. Why is the world like? First off, why is the job like this? Then why is the world like this? Especially when you're scrolling social media or just doom scrolling anything at this point. What's real, right? With Sora right now is going crazy. Who's lying? Who's manipulating? Why are they doing it? It sucks knowing that there's always a play being made by somebody, but not knowing who's playing or to what end they're playing. If you're a person like me, I'm a guy that sees patterns. I see movements. I see influence being pushed in directions. I see actions and reactions. You try to add it up like a math equation. And when you see what it's equaling, but you're missing a few of the variables, it makes it very difficult for you to, understand to what end. And that's why when something happens now, I don't see it as necessarily isolated. I see it as another piece to the overall picture, which I recommend you do as well, because most things are connected. I would go as far as to say all things are connected, so you really have to treat it as such. I believe that truth matters, even if it's uncomfortable. I believe in human dignity, in life, and legacy. When I say this, it's truth, like things like there's two genders. Yeah, there's males and there's females, and then there's people that are born with both. But I mean, it's the DNA. You can do whatever you want to change the outside. If you want to be crass, the plumbing, whatever it is, but your DNA stays the same. The way God made you stays the same. I mean, your emotions are also important, but reality doesn't really change. I think there's a lot of people that are sick, need a lot more love, need a lot more help, need a lot more prayer. We're called to love them anyway. And we're not the judges at the end of the day. We just share what we know to be true from how we see it. Now, when I say we, I'm talking like Christians, religious folk, evangelists that go to a lot of places where they seem like they shouldn't be there because it's not safe or they're not wanted. It's kind of, the playbook. If you read the book, you kind of know why they do it. Anyway, I digress. Because of my wiring, when things get chaotic, I don't stop thinking. I like to lean in, and I want to look for who is pulling the strings and to what end. So the promise that I make is, if I'm not right, I at least try to commit to clarity, honesty, transparency. If I say something that's wrong and it gets pointed out to me that it's wrong, great, thank you for letting me know it's wrong. Let's move on now that we know what's the most updated version of the truth, right? That way I and others can make informed decisions You remember that thing that people, millennials like myself, used to do in school with the essays, critical thinking? Can't get away from that, especially nowadays. So here's what I'm thinking for where we move on the channel. I am a big proponent of growth and personal development, but I think a lot of this starts with how a man thinks. As a man thinketh. So here's what we're going to see more from the channel: more deep dives, simple explainers, commentary on events, patterns that we're seeing, mysteries that are being solved in real time in front of us in the public eye, always from, at least as best as I can, the lens of truth and accountability. I'll try to always keep the facts clearly laid out on one side and then the opinions on the other side, and try to lay that out when I'm switching back and forth. But it's not that I'm not going to share my 2 cents, but I'm just going to notate when that is. Sometimes I might talk about money, culture, spiritual light, current events. Sometimes it might be something that completely comes out of left field, but I'm going to try to always tie it into what really matters, which is growing as individuals and as a society. And if you always work on the community that you can touch, then your community and your reach will continue to go beyond that community. So each one teach one. Let's all work on that. This is not a channel to push any sort of fixed ideology. I have my own personal identity. I'm going to speak from my lens, obviously, and I'll be making, I guess, arguments for my personal beliefs by how I express myself, as many people do. But I accept any and all different ideologies. I welcome open discourse. I think that's something that Charlie Kirk had very, very true. When you stop having discourse, that's when civil wars happen. And we definitely can't afford that, especially with all the enemies that we got outside of our borders. We don't need to create more division inside. That's what they want, All right, so let's test this out. Let's dive into our first deep dive. I'm going to take you through a topic, walk you through how I kind of parse it out, see what's happening publicly and behind the scenes right now regarding that topic. Before I get into it, where do you think I'm going to go? Which topic would you get into first if you were going to start doing deep dives on your YouTube channel? Would you go political, religious, something in the news, or something that would draw instant outrage for clicks? I've got a few in mind, but whatever one you think that I would have unpacked first or you want me to unpack next, leave it down in the comments, and we'll see when we'll get there. Because we're probably going to get there sooner rather than later. Ay, sugar.
And we haven't had the mic the entire time. Goodness gracious. It's about this time I realized I never even moved my mic back into place after my kids are playing up here earlier. You don't have to be perfect, guys. You just have to recognize when you can be doing a little bit better. And I could go back and record this, but let's see how it works out. If you're seeing this part, it worked out decent and edit. At least I tried. You know that classic saying, America is the land of the free? Part of the reason why is because we have the Bill of Rights. We have a whole bunch of freedoms that you just don't have in other countries just by virtue of having been born here. Thank God we were born in America. We could have been born in much worse countries. Just choose your year and look at the craziness that was happening around the world and just imagine that you were born there instead of here. Just don't. Just don't. Every week, it seems like that line, about the land of the free, there's an asterisk being added underneath it. Today I want to highlight, not that it's hidden at all, but I want to talk about how the freedom of speech isn't even under attack at this point. It's being reshaped every day. Pressure, platforms, profit, pushing a different definition of what speech, what allowed speech is, which I thought freedom of speech was all about. Freedom of speech, as long as you don't yell fire, right? That's the only thing you don't do. At least that's what it was when I was coming up. So I'll point to some facts, point to some people who dug the facts up because, like you, I like diving in and listening to people that are passionate about doing research because normally they spend more time doing it because they like it, and then they share like the juiciest parts. You do have to make sure that you can identify their bias when they're sharing, but if you listen to like two or three or four people and you choose two sets of people that have varying viewpoints, but they both have the same level of research, you're going to have a pretty good idea of what the truth really is. Just saying. And then after talking through a lot of the facts that we can find, I'll tell you what I think what might actually be going on. Large scale, macro. Um, it's never just a single. It's naive to think that anything happening in the world nowadays is as simple as just a local cause and effect. We're more and more interconnected every day because of the technology we have access to. So to think that any major event that happens any one place in the world is not connected or hadn't been touched by actors in another part of the world, that's the height of naivety. I hope you evolve past that level of thought as we continue to move into the future. So here's the pattern of pressure when it comes to attacks on freedom of speech. People say something unpopular, i.e., there are two genders. That's my personal opinion. That's what I know. That's what it's been from when I was a kid, outside of special cases. Not that I've ever met any of those special cases, but that's what I know to be true. Nowadays, that is something unpopular, and that will cause mobs, networks, advertisers to react. Then employers or platforms punish you or suspend you for saying the unpopular thing, and then debate erupts about the consequences and the intent of whatever you said. Were you trying to say it to inflate a riot? Were you trying to say it to educate somebody? Were you saying it because that's what you genuinely thought? It doesn't really matter because there's a knee-jerk reaction that happens the moment that something is said nowadays, and that is, I mean, that's indicative of the fact that the freedom of speech is under attack, right? This is happening in schools, corporations, media, platforms like this one. Not just one corner of the country or the world, or not one corner of the web. This is just across the board. The campus deplatforming database catalogs thousands of attempts to disinvite speakers and silence events on campus. That's FIRE, FIRE. Look it up. I'll put a lot of sources, like I said, at the end. Everybody knows recently that ABC suspended Jimmy Kimmel Live over his comments regarding the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And then the suspension produced massive debate. Again, freedom of speech. He's a celebrity. He's a public persona. He has a massive following, and he also has his own personal beliefs that he's paid to share like on a regular basis for years. We're talking back from the Man Show, which is like Pete Kimmel, all right? If we're being honest, but that was an opinion. You get it? Okay, cool. And of course, ABC later reinstated the show because when it comes down to it, he can say really whatever he wants, really without any kind of expectation of being let go from his employment because it's a lawsuit. It's freedom of speech 101. I don't sit here and invent these patterns. That's just one example of many. I consume a lot of deep dives. I have 3 young kids underneath the age of 5. So there's a lot of time where I'm just trying to cope with the energy around me. And some of those copings involving doing like a nice 10-minute Ian Carroll dive into whatever he's getting into nowadays, which is normally pretty interesting. I'll name a handful of creators or journalists that did legwork regarding freedom of speech. Matt Taibbi did a lot of coverage on the censorship industrial complex and how platform moderation and media dynamics interact, which is a phenomenal deep dive. Tim Pool, who I think is live right now. It's like 9:36. Yeah, he's live right now. He's been going strong with independent news and commentary for all kinds of events, from deplatforming, algorithmic suppression he did a video on, legal suits around big tech, talk about freedom of speech. I think tonight I saw he was mentioning something about the genocide of Christians in Nigeria that nobody talked about. I mean, it's interesting. It's interesting the things that get spoken about every day and the things that never get mentioned. Hint, hint, Epstein, right? We're still waiting for. Ben Shapiro, conservative commentator. He frequently testifies and comments on censorship, narratives, always raising concerns about collusion between media groups, platforms, talking about. Yes, I'm sure that in some cases, he can be overly inflammatory with his delivery, but anybody that has strong beliefs and a way of representing the way that they speak is going to rub people the wrong way. That doesn't mean that you, I guess, fight unfairly. Not that anybody really fights fairly unless they have to. And that's kind of the game nowadays. You don't fight fairly. Um, Conversation for another day, what corporations do. Jordan Peterson, another great example, public intellectual, currently really, really sick, praying for him, but he frames free speech as essential to thought and culture, good for philosophical context and public speech incidents at universities when he's debating and actually helping elevate the thought of the people that are interacting with him, which is, again, what we need more of. So there is a strategy at the large level as to how speech ends up becoming policed and that becomes the norm, because freedom of speech doesn't just get snatched away instantly. It's a insidious building of policies and norms until it becomes natural to say, well, you just can't say that anymore. Like I said, you start with creating a norm. That's not okay to say anymore. You put it in the workplace speech policies. You put it in school pronoun rules. You put it in platform policies. Right? Then you enforce it. Enforce it by example. All you really need to do is cancel one high-profile content creator, fire one high-profile CEO. It's you got to make an example, and then once you make an example, now nobody else wants to be the nail that's standing up that needs to get hammered down, right? That shrinks the Overton window without needing legislation. You don't need to make it illegal. You just have to make it distasteful. Then you up the pressure again by using algorithmic pressure and monetization. You're gonna reward outrage engagement from people that are not trying to say anything worthwhile, and then you're going to throttle channels that make platforms uncomfortable, that say anything that is adverse to your message. Even something like this that might be adverse to somebody's message would cause a video to be a shadow banned or taken down. But is what it is. Them's the chops. You got to figure out the right way, the right platform that will allow you to say what you want, and figure out how to get the traffic to find you later on. Again, Tim Pool and others have tracked shadow banning and algorithmic changes that have happened on platforms for years because they've been in the game for a while. It's a fact. Policies, suspensions, algorithm changes exist and have been documented. I mean, it's a fact. They happen. My take: these tools are being used not only to stay with the times and maximize profits like companies need to do, but they're being used strategically to shape the public square and influence which way the narrative goes. This is going more into my military background and psychological operations, but when you control the story, when you control the narrative, then you can dictate what the audience that's receiving that narrative might do. There's a lot of value there. So speaking about value, you got to ask yourself who benefits. It's normally one of three groups: political, corporate, or media. Really, outside of those three groups, nobody else is really controlling narratives at a large scale. Um, Political, really cut and dry motivations for anybody that's wondering. I mean, not that it should be difficult, but you're going to have fewer unsanctioned voices, meaning less people are going to be saying less things that you don't want them to say, and it's going to be easier to keep people in either box A or box B. Easier messaging control. You only have to speak to one message, not 18. You can mobilize a base if the opposition is muted. Very simple. At the corporate level, your outrage over certain words or actions is going to be able to drive clicks. It's going to be able to drive engagement. Or you can avoid litigation from human resources or bad PR by removing problems or bad actors quickly. Also, corporations also often align themselves with regulatory or stakeholder demands that favor predictability over free debate. They're not going to really ruffle the feathers unless it's something that's going to have a massive upside, because at the end of the day, they answer to the shareholders. They're in the business of making money, and you're not going to do something to jeopardize the bottom line unless there's money to be made on the back end. They don't really care about free speech. And just keeping it a buck. Media, outrage is raw material. The news stopped being about current events and news, I don't know, back in the 90s, early 2000s. Anchorman explains it much better. It's like a documentary. Will Ferrell's in it. It's great. Again, that's opinion. The more scandal, the more eyeballs want to look at the media, so you're going to be able to drive more revenue from advertisers. Platforms and legacy media both profit from escalations. It's just, again, fact. And again, this isn't new, right? Freedom of speech has always been under attack in various points throughout history. The Sedition Act, early blacklists, McCarthyism. States and institutions have long suppressed speech that was counter to their definition of order at the time, right? The methods shift with the times. It can be illegal, it could be corporate, it could be algorithmic with technology, right? But the pattern is the same. Say something that's not nice to people that have control over the means, and your voice gets suppressed. Pretty easy. The modern difference is that platforms scale so quickly that when you have something like a cancellation or a deplatforming event, it can have national effects like within 24 to 48 hours, depending on the size of the platform. I already spoke about what happened with Kimmel, right? Gets suspended, he gets reinstated. Attack on freedom of speech, it got blown over. Spoke about on Timcast, just speaking about the genocide in Nigeria on Christians. I didn't even know some of these numbers. I think Bill Maher was speaking about it the other day. Something like 19,000 churches over the last 15 years have been destroyed in the country. 19,000 churches over 15 years. How is that not news? How are not Christians not up in arms? It's so difficult to really parse out the facts, especially when you don't have boots on the ground. You're not actually looking for yourself and actually being able to see everything that you need to know to have all the facts. Who's pushing hardest in these different scenarios? Who is losing money? Who's gaining money? Who's gaining clicks? Who's controlling the narrative before, during, and after people are getting removed and reinstated? Really, now that I think about it, it's really more of a combination attack on freedom of speech and an ongoing attack on the trust in just various mediums of media for the truth, which has been ongoing for at least 20 years at this point. Here's how I suggest you think about it. Have a checklist from when you're taking something, you're taking in some news, you're taking in some sort of information. Because there is an attack on the freedom of speech, you have to understand that whatever you're receiving might be a partial message specifically manufactured to create an emotion in you. You need to try to fight that knee-jerk reaction if you want to possibly become a better version of yourself and be able to learn a little bit more about things that hot button issues for you currently. And run through this checklist. Identify the facts. What's the timeline? What happened? Who are the actors? Find deep dives if you can to learn up on what happened before and catch you up to where you are now. You can continue updating your own opinion as to what's happening. If this is your mindset whenever you're taking in information, you're going to find it easier to ask about motive as opposed to instantly defaulting to outrage. You don't want to have blind outrage. You'd much rather be asking who's benefiting and what is happening right now. And then I think you'll find it easier to hold both compassion and principles when you're hearing something. You should be able to, regardless of where your allegiances lie when it comes to your personal beliefs, disapprove of bad speech and resist just systematic silencing of people. Those things should never happen, regardless if that's the opposition or a friend. I'm not trying to tell you who to like or who to hate. I'm telling you to get good at seeing the script that's being read. See the identify that plays are being run and that there is a playbook that exists, right? When you start to see the script and the plays, then you can start to make smarter choices for you and your family. As a citizen, as a parent, as a consumer, as a believer, just across the board, you'll just be a more well-informed human being. And that's all I care about. One race, right? If you want the sources I used today, I'll be posting them somewhere, probably down below in the descriptions. The exact videos, articles, really just the general sources, and you can really parse through it yourself. If you want the specific sources, say sources in the comments, and I'll put something together for you. I'll make a PDF available somewhere. Next week, who knows? I have a few ideas, but if you want me to cover something specific next time, comment below, and I'll look for it. Till then, stay safe. Peace.